Episode 9 of The Handmaid's Tale is perfect. I'm gonna be bold and just say that it is. It's gone down as one of the highest rated episodes that the show has ever made, and I don't disagree with that in the slightest. I understand that for the most part, this season has probably been below par and the writing has felt quite rushed, but I don't feel that diminishes the importance and the impressive nature of the most recent installment. It doesn't inflate it in the slightest. Season 6 Episode 9 was a great piece of television for a wide array of different reasons. It tapped into our emotions, it captured the tone and mood of an oppressed nation, but also allowed revenge and hope to shine through from those wanting to fight for freedom. And it just had this natural rhythm that always felt like it was building towards something big, and it didn't let us down in the slightest. So with that, I want to discuss why this episode was so good, and I want to know if you agree. So let's get into it. Here is why The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 Episode 9 is perfect. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The decision to kill Lawrence and Nick. One thing that I thought was a bold move for the show to make was for them to kill off both Commander Lawrence and also Nick in the same episode. In fact, the same scene. Most of us thought that Nick would be in the Testaments because he's referenced several times throughout the novel. So in seeing him being killed in a way that was heartbreaking to watch because June simply couldn't do anything about it, it took most of us by surprise. With Nick's death, it was one where you felt the pain that June was going through in knowing that somebody that she loved, but also somebody that she'd walked away from, which was symbolically done a couple of episodes back during the wedding when she chose not to go up to him. But she still had that ounce of care towards him. It was something that was felt. Hence her reaction when he stepped on the plane. The fact they gave June this ultimatum one final time was a decision that I'm glad they made. She obviously cared for Nick and loved him, but she knew that if she saved him, then she'd be found and killed, and the other commanders would have gotten away. So like how Nick allowed the girls in Jezebel's to be killed, June did the same to him. What I liked about having Nick's death and Commander Lawrence's death at the same time is that they were both on the plane having sided with Mayday at one point in their lives, but their intentions were complete contrasts at the end. Nick ultimately picked his side of wanting to be a commander of Gilead due to his fear of being nothing without the evil brotherhood that he was a part of. Something which was best summed up by the speech that he gave to June when they were in bed, where he said that she wouldn't have been interested in him outside of that. He ultimately turned the other cheek to what was morally right in the world, despite not truly believing in the traditional Gilead ways, and he chose to fit in rather than stand up for what was right, only because he was benefiting off of it. Whereas with Commander Lawrence, he died as a man that was doing right for what he believed in and for the betterment of the nation. He stepped on board that plane knowing that he was gonna die, knowing that Gilead would be held back if the likes of Commander Wharton were still to walk the earth. So we saw two main characters, two fan-favorite characters have the same death, but ultimately picking opposing sides right at the end, and I thought that was a nice touch. I actually loved the fact that Lawrence's death was hinted at from the moment that he said goodbye to Angela and Naomi in the first third of the episode. He gave a speech about how Angela wanted to learn and that they had to teach her and that it was the most important thing. It put an emphasis on the fact that she was the future, and it also made me think back to the speech that Janine gave in episode 4 where she said how even the lives of daughters of commanders can end up going in directions that they don't quite expect. So it showed how he didn't want Angela to end up in a position where she was exploited by the system. With him saying goodbye to her and telling her to draw him lots of pictures with colors, the smile that he had just told me that he'd never be seeing her again. When Lawrence was standing at the top of the steps before he walked on board, that look of finality in Joseph's eyes as he put his hand on his heart staring at June, showing that he was doing what he was doing for the likes of Angela and hopefully providing a step forward for a better future for those that are oppressed. It was just heartbreaking. He paid the ultimate price, and the way to be at peace with it is to know that he's now reunited with Eleanor, the person that he loved most in the world and was mourning every day of his life since she passed. The almost poetry in Nick saying to Lawrence that Rose told him to get on the plane, but him also saying that June always told him to step away from it all, and Lawrence responding with, "You should have listened to her," knowing full well what was about to happen was such a cold line, and it just made my stomach drop. With the wide shot of all of the commanders sitting on the plane, it did make me question if we were going to see it happen or not, and the way that it just lingered on them for what I'd say was just a little bit longer than what was comfortable, it made me think that it was going to cut to black and the episode would conclude. However, with the debris raining down from the sky and June's face lighting up in orange, it was a haunting, emotional, and painful sight to see, because two characters that we'd grown to like over the years were now gone. Nick I was less sad about because he picked his side and he chose to be on the side of evil, but Lawrence, man, he was never supposed to be on the plane. The handling of the death of two main characters was done in one of the best ways possible. It had an unexpected twist within it too, in fact, in the sense that Lawrence wasn't supposed to get on the plane, and also Nick arrived out of the blue, and it was poetic the way that they both went out. Elisabeth Moss's performance and direction. Elisabeth Moss was a standout as June in this episode. The entire scene of the planned execution is one that's going to live long in the memory when looking back on the show. I know a lot of people get frustrated with the close-up shots of her looking into the camera, but in this instance, it was the perfect decision to make. There was no hiding the emotions that she was feeling. This was us seeing June after 6 seasons of pain, suffering, and fighting, being faced with the prospect of the end. And her emotional speech cut through with such weight and power, with that singular tear rolling down her cheek. Even when she was on the ground after she'd been lowered, once the fighting was taking place, her eyes spoke 1,000 words as she was on the knife's edge of death and was being lured in. Not only was her performance really strong in this scene, but I'd also say that during the final scene where we saw that she wasn't able to warn Nick about the bomb that he'd be getting on board with, you could see the conflict in her mind with the look in her eyes, and that she was almost sick to the stomach in knowing that he was going to perish if he got on the plane. The tension that was there when Nick was lingering on the steps, not knowing if she was going to say something, had me on the edge of my seat. Plus, I'd also say that when she was staring up at the debris which was glistening in the sky, you could see that there was this sense of mourning that was already present, this sense of responsibility, but also this overarching look of progression that could well be made, and that it was a sacrifice that she needed to allow to happen. So in getting all of that across, I thought it was really impressive. I didn't actually realize Elisabeth Moss directed this episode until the credits started rolling, and I was so impressed with it. The scene where she was walking up to the gallows was such a haunting moment. Her response to looking at the rope, knowing that this could be the end, even the framing of it all, having her front and center and all of the other handmaids around her, and even Aunt Lydia too, it was just orchestrated so well. There were many other scenes that she directed well too, such as when Serena was running through the dark open road where she seemed like an easy target with nowhere to truly hide. It got that feeling of vulnerability across and that she could have been caught. I also thought the same with the way that the handmaids were caught during the beginning. I really didn't expect the Guardians to find them as they were heading towards the border. So the decision to have that twist where they were rounded up and held captive essentially allowed the entirety of this episode to happen. It was an unexpected twist for sure. The music and score. One element of this episode that I absolutely loved was the selection of music and the score that ran all throughout it. First off, having Look What You Made Me Do by Taylor Swift playing in the background under the first scene was the perfect selection because it literally encapsulated what the handmaids had just done, and that they were driven to do something because of the commanders, so it suited it really well. But the score that got me the most was the one that underpinned the execution scene and the battle that we saw taking place. That score was simply phenomenal, and it matched the scene so well. It almost got me to the point of tears, especially when the fighting was taking place. There'd been such silence throughout the speeches that were made, and then once June was rescued down from the crane, the music hit and it just felt like it captured the sound of war. But also a sense of inspiration and hopefulness, because at that point, Mayday and the Handmaids seemed to have the upper hand. So the score is definitely one of the core elements that made me appreciate this episode a lot, and it added to the reason as to why it was perfect. Episode 9 was genuinely one of the strongest episodes that The Handmaid's Tale has given us, and even though I've seen many people praising it highly, there have still been a few that have said that it doesn't deserve to be considered perfect because it's amongst an overall average season. However, I do disagree. You could tell that a lot of thought, effort, and time was put into making sure that we got the ending to the present day in Gilead that we deserved and what felt right. So with what could be an epilogue being on the way in episode 10, this episode will be a difficult one to top, because honestly, I feel it was perfect. So, There you have it, why The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 Episode 9 is perfect. If you want to see every episode of The Handmaid's Tale Season 6 being broken down, then check the playlist below. There's only one episode left, so if you need to catch up, it'll all be there. Do you think Episode 9 was perfect? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.